Okay, this presentation is going to be about the history of German and English and how they're connected together in different ways. And you might ask yourself why look at this historical perspective. And there's two answers to that. The first one is because a lot of times noticing how German and English evolved together will help you in your translation to see what English word a German word represents. But then also, just because it's interesting in its own right, to kind of know the connections between the languages. And so German and English both are part of a group of languages called Indo-European languages. That's a large family of languages of approximately 140 different languages on the European continent and in the Near and Far East. These have been documented since about 300 BCE, so quite a long history. There are a number of characteristics that they have that that justify grouping them together. One is inflection, so they have like the ending of the words change for the verb persons, like the plural versus singular, first versus second person. They also have a tendency to fuse morphemes, so the sounds of one morpheme, which is one syllable, so to say, in a word, they can influence each other and change each other. And they also have a number of ways of expressing syntactic relationships through different affixes, such as suffixes or prefixes. There's a lot of those in German. There's a lot of them in English too, like ing, a whole number of different ones used to kind of create adjectives and adverbs. There's also a phenomenon called Uplaut. If you look at the examples there, the one I have here, Mann versus Männer, that's singular versus plural. In English we have that a lot in the verbs, eat versus ate, read versus read for the present and past tense forms. And there's also something called Umlaut that's kind of a specific deal in German. And some of the other languages, Scandinavian languages, have this too, though. This verb right here is können, and it means to be able to. And this version of it here is konnten, so here the difference between können and konnten. Konnten is the past tense form, and so it's also used in German to differentiate the past and the present tense. Just one thing to point out, Indo-European as a notion is something that we don't have any proof of. It's kind of a philological creation, you could say, created by language theorists by looking at later language developments and kind of theorizing about how the languages became interrelated in the way they are. In this notion of Indo-European, there are two different groups. On the left, you have the ones that we're going to be working with, German and English. We also have Greek and Latin, Celtic. Over on the other side, we have Sanskrit, Indo-Persian languages, and the Slavic languages, like Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish. If we go down here, continue a little further, and it's hard to know for sure exactly whether or not all the different languages in this group developed from one core language. That's kind of the Indo-European thesis, or and that would be through connections that, like there was one original language, people started moving around, and then because of their distance between each other and the influences of other people, the language has changed. Or it could be that there were lots of different languages, and that all the population shifts and trade and stuff like that happened kind of brought about similarities between the languages. So it's really difficult to tell, almost impossible to know for sure. One thing we can know for sure, though, is that there are in fact a lot of similarities between the languages in this group. And if we look at one example, the word for hundred, and it's been theorized that in Indo-European you could have had a word like tom, or somehow, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that one. But if we look over on our left-hand column, the languages that we're working with here, German and English, beginning with Latin, and we'll see throughout this presentation that the influence of Latin upon the development of English and German is immense. In Latin we have centum for 100, Greek hekaton, and then eventually down here Gothic we have Hund, and then Old High German Hund to High German Hundert, and then English hundred. And so you can see the definite or the similarity is really, really clear there. There are a number of languages spoken in Europe, interestingly, that are not part of the Indo-European family, and probably are from people that migrated in and then kept their own language identity and didn't either change their language to match the rest or stem from some Indo-European stem. And those are Basque, Turkish, Finnish, or Finn, Hungarian, and Estonian. And so let's see. And so the next question, or the question I want to ask first in the development of our languages is, how did we get from Indo-European, in this kind of philological creation, to Germanic languages? And in order to do that, there's several phonetic shifts that had to take place to differentiate the Germanic languages. Probably one of the most important ones is the word accent shifted to the beginning of words. Whereas if you look at Latin or if you look at Greek, a lot of times the word accent is towards the end, and it's used to focus on the part of the word that tells you the difference between plural or singular or present or past tense. In Germanic languages, the word accent is almost always on the first syllable, and so that means the word endings became less important, and that necessitated the development of a system of articles like the, in German der, die, das. One of the most important defining factors was what is called the first or Germanic sound shift. In German, that's called a Lautverschiebung, and that affects the consonants in the Germanic languages. Also, the systematic use of the Indo-European Uplaut system in the strong verbs. In Greek, for instance, Uplaut can be used to differentiate between singular and plural, all kinds of different things. But in the Germanic languages, it's almost exclusively for the verbs. And so in German, we have there sehen, that's the infinitive. Sieht is the third person singular present tense. And then the past tense form is sahen. So we have a stem vowel shift from sehen to sahen. Just like in English, actually, we have see and saw. And then along with this use of Uplaut for the strong verbs, we also had, in point 4, the emergence of a new way of forming the past tense for new verbs that are coming into the language from Latin and from Greek, not really from Greek, but from Latin, then later from French. It's called a dental suffix. And let me try to think of one. Well, okay, like in German we have the word spielen. Let's see if I can type that there. Spielen is to play. And then the past tense, spielten. And in English we have that too, to play or played. Like I play the guitar, I played the guitar. And so that's something that you see in all the Germanic languages. In the Germanic languages there are 3 families, and I'll just kind of touch on these briefly. Eastern Germanic, the only one we have left of that is Gothic, and it's from a Bible translation from around 400 AD. From a guy named Wulfila. And the other groups are the Northern Germanic group, so Norwegian, Icelandic, Anglo-Saxon, Danish, Swedish, and eventually English, and the West Germanic, which are Rhine, Old Frank, Aleman, Bavarian, specifically from southern Germany, and that eventually becomes High German. And so what differentiated these Germanic languages from English? Like I said above, the chord shift is what's called the first Germanic Lautverschiebung, or sound shift. It affects the consonants in the language. And so I have here on the left hand Indo-European consonants and then Germanic consonants. And so the first group that gets affected are P, T, K. They get kind of shifted to and so the examples we have here in Latin, pata or patea, and then in German, or in German and Gothic and lots of other, the Germanic languages, fadar, tres, which is 3. In Gothic becomes tres, and then that becomes drei in German, or 3 in English. And then cornu, which is, well, in English corn, and then here in Gothic, juan. So that's the first group. The second group are a group of aspirated consonants. So the little H there stands for an aspiration, like in the example here, pejero, those lose their aspiration, so they go from this bach, dach, gach to b, bdg, or bdg. And here we have some examples of those. So bejero, in Latin ferro, becomes bera, and then in English bear. And then here in these square brackets I have the modern German bear. Medios becomes Latin medios, and then Gothic medius, English middle, and then German Mitte. And so here, and this is what I wanted to focus on here, is the similarities between the English and the German based on the sound shifts. And then this one here, grostis, becomes hostis in Latin, and then Gothic gasts, English guest, and then German Gast. And so the final sound shift in this first group are then the let's see here, we need some more PTKs, and so BDG, what was BDG unaspirated, becomes a new set of PTKs. In the examples we have here, let's see, this one is deep, so dreup becomes dupes, and that's deep or tief. And this difference right here between deep and modern German tief we'll look at in just a minute when we see the second sound shift. The same, in this case, pod becomes that would be in Latin, I think podes or something, and then in Gothic fotus, because you get the P to F conversion, and then in English that's foot, or in German Fuß. And then the last one, agros to acres, and then acre or acker in modern German. So this first sound shift was over by around 400 to 250 BCE. Latin words brought into Germanic languages after this time we're no longer subject to this shift. So you'll see some Latin words that don't have these characteristics, and that just means that they were imported into German a little bit later. Okay, so our next move here, that was the first sound shift, is going to be to look at what's called High German. And this is where English really becomes differentiated from German, because as we'll see, English is actually a dialect of Low German as opposed to High German. High German is a blanket term, and it's generally divided into different regions and then also time periods. So the first one spatially, we have Low and High German, and then there's also Middle German. And I'm sorry, there's Low German and the High German, with High German being divided into these three different versions. So Oberdeutsch is like High German or Over German, Mitteldeutsch is Middle German, and then Niederdeutsch is Low German. And so if we look here, let me see if I can find the map. Nope, there it is. Okay, so this one shows us here, this yellow region would be Low German. And it's kind of weird because on the map it looks like it's on the top, but in terms of altitude, those are the lowlands of Germany. Middle German is right here in the blue area, and then Oberdeutsch, or High German, is way down here in the southern part of Germany. And so just as an example of a word and its different pronunciations across this range, the word for I in German is ich in modern German. In Low German they say ich with a k. In the middle part, Middle German, they actually say ich, just like in modern German. And then here in southern Germany, they say something like ish. And in dialects in Germany today, you still hear that difference. Okay, so that's the spatial breakdown. Temporally, there's Old, Middle, Early New, and New High German. And here I have the dates for those. The Middle High German, or I'm sorry, the Old High German that we're going to be looking at now or considering is the point where English and German leave the same developmental path and become distinctly different. And so one thing just to remember is that these periods and regional versions of High German, they're not like unified languages, but they're kind of stages of development. And you'll see a lot of kind of like mixture of different forms across borders, because back then hardly anybody wrote, and so the language was really pretty flexible. It wasn't actually until the late 16th century when Martin Luther translated the Bible and created an alliance between in connection between Middle and Obergerman, the language began to standardize. And so this Bible translation was kind of a pivotal point for the for German as a literary language and as a stabilized kind of written language. Latin alphabet was appropriated sometime between Gothic, which is like 400 AD, and Old High German, which is like 750 AD. And one thing that we notice in this appropriation of Latin, though, is that there's a lot of arbitrariness in orthography. And that's because everybody kind of just wrote how they pronounced it, you know. And so what's really cool is you can actually go into a lot of these texts, and you can see by the way that they spell stuff what region the text was written in. You know, for instance, the ik example from above. If you see ik written in the text, you know, okay, that was written somewhere in, you know, in the very, like, you know, northern part of Germany, in Lower German. One example, just kind of this mixture, is a song, or as a text called the Hildebrandslied, which is from around 900 AD. And this is the first page of it. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, or even a line-by-line kind of an approach to it, but just kind of highlight two words. This word that I'm like underlining right here with the cursor is Uortum, Wortum, and it means word. And if you look here, the W is literally a W. That's the V sound, because Latin doesn't have a V sound. But if we go a couple lines down in the text, we have this word. It looks like a P with a line on it, A-R-U-N. But this is actually what's called a rune. It's an old Germanic alphabet, and this is the V sound from that. And so this word is Varun, which is just were. And so here we see kind of the mixture of trying to use Latin only and still falling back on like pagan/Germanic writing traditions. It's a really interesting song. If you're interested in it, I can give you a full, like, you know, transcribed version of it to kind of check out. Okay, and so the defining factor for this time period, the Old High German, is what's called the Second or High German Lautverschiebung, or sound shift. And so this one, you know, takes us from Indo-Germanic / Germanic. Actually, I should take that out. It takes us from Germanic to High German. And High German is what we have in Germany today. And so if we were to put the first sound shift, the page from that next to this one, we're going to see systematically the sounds that were shifted in that one. So the F, the th sound, and the sound are then shifting over and becoming, in High German, the F, the TH sound. High German doesn't have that. That's why a lot of Germans have an accent for their TH. And so you have a D there, but then this H or sound actually kind of stays the same. So there's not a big shift there. So for this one right here is thorn in English. What might it be in German then? Ha, you got it. It's Dorn. So the word for thorn in German is Dorn. You can see the real close connection between those. And for each of these, I've offered you in squared off parentheses, if the word is still used, the modern German word for these different sound shifts. And here I also left the Latin on just so we can remember it. So we have pater, Vater, and then Old High German is Vater, and New High German is Vater, and that's our father. So we still have this TH right here. We didn't make this last step. Tres becomes Tres, and that's drei in German. Or that's drei actually in Old High German, and then drei in Modern German. And we have three, so we once again are back here with the TH sound. We don't make the final shift. The last one is a word that's fallen out of use in Modern German. The next group there, BDG, becomes either a B or a P. The D becomes a T sound. So in English we have the word bed. We're right here. We didn't make this shift. What might it be in German? You got it. It's bet. So you see that German and English are really, really closely related. Yeah, these we've already kind of looked at. So let me get to the last group, because this is kind of the most interesting one. This one is the one that gives a lot of Modern German its characteristic sounds. So the PTK that we had from the original sound shift we came up with, we either end up shifting those into a f or a p sound. The t is a either a t or a z or a s sound, and then the k gets doubled into a ch, or like a k sound. And so here we have Diops in Gothic. In German, it's Tiof in Old High German. In Modern German, it's Tief. And so here we can see where we don't, in modern English, this word would be deep. And so here we see that we didn't make that shift. Both the D and the T, I'm sorry, the D in deep doesn't shift into a T, like above, and the P doesn't shift into an F. And so this one you can see where you got some really drastic changes in the beginning and at the end of the word. So that's from teeth to English was deep. Here we have in English foot. So we're right here with a T at the end. In German it becomes Fuß, and then in modern German Fuß. And so we can see the difference. The T becomes a double S in German from English. Here the P became an F and the D became a T. And then in the last example, Acker becomes Acker, and that in English is acre. So that one there's not a whole lot of difference. Yeah, and these variations, like there's lots of different variations here for the way to shift the PTK. They kind of depend on the location of the consonant in the word. And I'll go through this kind of quick and just to show you some of the examples. Sometimes you'll have PTK going into these doubled spirants. So instead of a P, which is an explosive, you have a F, which is called a spirant, between two vowels, so in the middle, or after a vowel at the end of a word. So here, an example, English is make. Then we have machen, was Old High German. So we get this shift from English K, so we don't make this shift, to this sound. Modern German is machen. English ship, so we have a P sound. The High German shift that we didn't experience in German makes that an F, so we have skiff in Old High German, and then schiff in Modern German. Out in English, of course we don't make this High German sound shift, becomes us in Old High German, and then aus, which means out, in Modern German. So you see the connections. Out, aus is just the T that changes. In all of these, it's just a simple consonant that changes that gives us the whole new word that seems totally different, but it's actually just the same as English once we can see through these vowel changes. The other change that's possible, PTK, P is a P sound, T is a Ts sound, and then K becomes a K sound. This happens at the beginning of the word. So path in English becomes in German Pfad. Satyan in Gothic, which is to sit, becomes sitzen in Old High German. Sitzan in Old High German, and sitzen in New High German. I should have changed that. Salt in English, we have T to a Ts, becomes Salz in German. And this one has two changes. Pepper, we have first the P at the beginning of the word, whoops, to F, that's this one. But then we also have, let's see where to go, the P in the middle of the word, which is, let's see, oh, I did that by the other way around, sorry. So the P at the beginning of the word is PF, and the P in the middle is double F. So pepper in English. Also pipa in Latin becomes pfeffer in German. And so you can see if you just kind of like notice these changes, the systematicness behind the vowel changes, you can do really well in guessing the meaning of different words. Let's see here. And like I said, there's one really, this is something for the people studying classics perhaps even most, but there's a lot of Roman influence in Germania at this time period. So the second sound shift, the one above, begins around 500 AD. It's a pretty new development. And then there's a number of Latin words, the presence of numerous Latin words in Old High German that were subject to the second sound shift, but maybe not the first one, suggests early contact and trade with the Romans. And here are a lot of them. There is the Latin word on the left, and then the Old High German one, and then the Modern German one in squared off parentheses. So strata becomes straza, and that's Straße. So this is a way of, I'm going to put this document inside the folder on the front page of the course on presentations. So if you're interested more in that, you can look. Here's our pepper example. Pipa becomes Pfeffer, and that's Pfeffer, and then in English, of course, pepper. And so we didn't make this second High German sound shift. Go ahead and post any questions you have about this presentation, and I'll be happy to answer them. Well, I hope this is at least in some way enlightening.